Answers for week of October 4th. Here we're talking about the justification in detail here, specifically that God has forgiven all sins. And what does it mean that he has no charges against mankind? If we look at those Bible verses that I gave you initially there, we're looking at two specifically. For he hath made to him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we may be the righteousness of God in him. The 2 Corinthians passage is very identified there. Also Romans 4:5, for the sake of Christ's complete satisfaction, God justifies the ungodly. So when you look at those two texts, we see that there is a replacement here, or sort of an exchange. Our guilt is given to Christ. Christ takes care of that guilt on the cross. And so we're no longer responsible for the results of our sins because Christ took that responsibility. And then we also see those other couple of verses you have there, Romans 3:3 and 2 Timothy 2:13, as being very important there, because on the part of God, reconciliation and the forgiveness of sins is not merely a possibility. What is it? It's a fact. It's an objective reality, which has nothing to do with the personal attitude of mankind. So nothing we do has anything to do with it. Everything that God does has everything to it. Christ paid for the sins of all men, and a God accepting this payment has in his heart forgiven all sins in all men. We need to keep that in mind. Now, there is the two things that I highlighted at the end to direct you to the catechism, the active and passive obedience of Christ. And these are very, very important when discussing what Christ has done for us and seeing that the gospel is solely God's action. The active obedience of Christ is Jesus being actively obedient to God's law. He keeps the law perfectly. And of course, we see that it's a vicarious act. He does it on our behalf. This is where he gives us his righteousness. It's credited to us as though we did it. And then the passive obedience we're more familiar with. That is the suffering, the death, the resurrection, the payment for sin that Jesus has given to us. Now, as I mentioned before, it's going to be difficult for us to deal with a world around us that does not believe in sin. But it's still essential to show people that they have sinned. But it's also essential to show people that there is an answer for sin. And it's very much so in these verses that we've looked at. Thank you.